The chilling case of John List, the accountant who murdered his family and escaped justice for 18 years. A quiet suburban home, a devoted father. And then, in one horrifying day, John List murdered his entire family and vanished without a trace. He secretly lived freely under a new identity while his victims were left behind, forgotten by the world. This is the shocking true story of America's most calculated family annihilator.
Many of you watched tonight's CBS movie Judgment Day, the John List story. It was about the New Jersey accountant who slaughtered his entire family and managed to escape arrest for 17 years. We went to find out what the real John List was like and what might have driven him to murder.
In 1971, John List shocked America with one of the most cold-blooded family massacres in history. He murdered his wife, mother, and 3 children inside their New Jersey mansion before carefully disappearing without a trace. For nearly 18 years, John List lived under a false identity, blending into society while his family's murders went unsolved. His capture in 1989 revealed a chilling story of financial despair, religious justification, and meticulous planning. In this video, we explore the terrifying case of John List, how he managed to evade justice for almost 2 decades, and the lasting impact of his crimes. The perfect family that wasn't from the outside, John List's life looked like the American dream. He lived in a grand New Jersey mansion with his wife, 3 children, and even his elderly mother. Neighbors saw him as a quiet man, a churchgoer, and a responsible father. But beneath that calm image, John was a man drowning in fear and pride. He had lost his job as an accountant and was secretly broke, unable to provide for the lifestyle he believed his family deserved. Instead of asking for help, his obsession with appearances grew stronger. The pressure was building, and John was preparing for something unthinkable. Behind the walls of that mansion, cracks in the perfect family began to show. His wife, Helen, was struggling with alcoholism and health issues, and John resented her deeply. His children, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick, were filled with life and promise, but their futures no longer matched his rigid expectations. The thought of losing his home, his reputation, and his image of control consumed him daily. He prayed in silence, yet he twisted his faith into justification for what he was about to do. In his mind, the family was heading toward moral and financial ruin. And so, John List began planning what he called a mercy killing. The day of horror on November 9th, 1971, John woke up with chilling calmness. He ate breakfast with his children, as if it was just another day. But inside, he knew it would be their last. One by one, he lured his family into a deadly trap. First, he shot his wife, Helen, in the kitchen as she sipped her morning coffee. Then, he walked upstairs and shot his mother, Alma, as she fixed her breakfast. The silence in that house became suffocating, broken only by John's deliberate footsteps. But he didn't stop there. Patricia, his 16-year-old daughter, came home from school later, only to be met with the same fate. Then Frederick, his 13-year-old son, followed. When his eldest, John Jr., came home, the boy fought back, forcing his father to shoot him multiple times before he finally died. Their lives ended in the very house they trusted as safe. With chilling precision, John placed their bodies neatly on sleeping bags in the ballroom. He then wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, justifying his crimes as saving their souls from sin. For John, this was not murder. It was his twisted version of salvation. The letters he left behind. John List didn't just leave behind his victims. He also left behind chilling letters that explained his reasoning. In these notes, he confessed that he could no longer provide for his family financially, and that killing them was, in his twisted mind, an act of mercy. He believed he was saving their souls from a life of poverty, despair, and moral corruption. He justified every shot, every life he took, with a cold sense of religious duty. It's terrifying to think how a father could convince himself that murder was a divine solution. His faith, which should have been a guide toward love and protection, was instead warped into justification for cruelty. These letters became some of the most haunting evidence of his disturbed state of mind. What makes the letters even more chilling is how calm and methodical they were. He didn't write with the guilt of a man who had just wiped out his family, but with the tone of someone convinced he had done the right thing. His words dripped with self-righteousness, claiming he was protecting them from suffering. Instead of remorse, there was pride in his final act of fatherly love. Investigators and the public were horrified to read these words, realizing they were not just confessions, but justifications. This added an even darker layer to the tragedy, as it showed he truly believed he was righteous. His handwriting was neat, controlled, and emotionless, just like his killings. Vanishing into thin air. After killing his family and leaving his notes behind, John List vanished. Neighbors and friends didn't immediately suspect anything because the house was eerily quiet, as if the family had gone on a long trip. But in reality, he had cut off all ties, abandoned everything, and disappeared into a new life. For weeks, the house remained silent, with mail piling up and neighbors growing suspicious. When authorities finally entered, the stench of death was overwhelming, and the horror inside was revealed. By then, List was already far away, blending into a new identity. His escape was almost as shocking as the murders themselves. What shocked investigators most was how carefully he planned his disappearance. He cancelled subscriptions, stopped deliveries, and even turned down the thermostat so bodies wouldn't decay too quickly. It was all meant to buy him time to escape before anyone realized what had happened. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was cold-blooded murder executed with military precision. For nearly 18 years, John List lived freely, walking among unsuspecting neighbors under a new name. He created an entirely new persona, as if his past didn't exist. To the world around him, he was just another ordinary man, a life rebuilt under a new identity. John List didn't live in hiding in the shadows, he built a whole new life. He moved to Denver, Colorado, and assumed the name Robert Clark. He found work as an accountant, remarried, and lived what looked like a normal suburban life. He went to church, joined the community, and portrayed himself as a respectable man. Nobody suspected that behind his quiet demeanor was a man who had slaughtered his family. It was the perfect mask for a monster, polite, calm, and unassuming. He blended in so well that even those closest to him never saw the truth. His new life was eerily similar to his old one, almost as if he was trying to rewrite his past. He went back to church every Sunday, as though his faith hadn't driven him to commit the unthinkable. He worked steadily, lived modestly, and avoided drawing attention to himself. His new wife had no idea about his horrific past, believing she had married a gentle, responsible man. Meanwhile, back in New Jersey, the mansion where the murders occurred stood as a decaying reminder of his crime. It became a haunted landmark, a house of death, while he quietly lived in peace hundreds of miles away. The contrast was chilling. Life went on for him, but for his victims, everything had ended. The break in the case, for 18 long years, John List evaded capture. He might have gone to his grave a free man, if not for a groundbreaking moment on television. In 1989, the TV show America's Most Wanted aired an episode featuring his case. Forensic artists created an age-progressed clay bust of what he might look like after so many years. The bust was shockingly accurate, right down to his glasses and receding hairline. Millions of viewers saw it, and one person recognized him almost immediately. That single broadcast cracked open the case. The power of television became a weapon of justice. The clay bust was so lifelike that even List's former neighbors were stunned by its accuracy. One woman who had known him in Denver saw the broadcast and realized her quiet, church-going neighbor Robert Clark was actually John List. She wasted no time contacting authorities. It was a chilling moment of realization that the kindly man next door had a monstrous secret. After nearly 2 decades, the mask he wore began to crumble. Justice was finally closing in. The arrest. In June 1989, John List's double life came crashing down. Authorities tracked him to his home in Richmond, Virginia, where he was living under his false identity. When officers knocked on his door, he didn't resist or try to flee. He calmly admitted who he was, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. The polite, unassuming man neighbors knew was suddenly unmasked as one of America's most notorious family annihilators. It was surreal for those who had known him. How could the man they trusted hide such a horrific past? The arrest was the end of his charade, but only the beginning of his reckoning. When questioned, List tried to maintain his calm and logical demeanor. He still clung to the twisted belief that his actions were justified, that he had saved his family from financial ruin and eternal damnation. But to investigators, there was nothing noble in his crime, only selfishness and cruelty. He had robbed 5 people of their lives because he couldn't face his own failures. The world saw him not as a protector, but as a coward. For the families of the victims, the arrest brought relief, but also reopened deep wounds. Justice was finally within reach, but the pain would never fully heal. The trial, John List's trial in 1990, captivated the nation. The prosecution painted him as a cold-blooded killer who meticulously planned the murders to free himself from financial and personal burdens. They argued he could have sought help, declared bankruptcy, or simply left, but instead, he chose the most horrific path. Witnesses recalled his calm demeanor, his religious devotion, and his double life. His own letters and confessions became damning evidence. The jury didn't take long to see through his justifications. He was found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder. During the trial, List remained eerily calm, rarely showing emotion. It was as if he had separated himself from his crime, detached and unfeeling. The defense tried to argue that he suffered from PTSD and mental illness, pointing to his time in the military and his fragile mental state. But the jury wasn't swayed. They saw a man who knew exactly what he was doing. They saw someone who had carefully planned every detail, not a man acting out of uncontrollable madness. In the end, the verdict was clear. He was guilty. Sentencing. In May 1990, John List was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison. The judge condemned him as a man who had carried out the most cold-blooded, premeditated murders imaginable. For the first time in years, the families of the victims felt a sense of justice. The community, too, felt some closure, though nothing could erase the horror of what happened. List showed little emotion as the sentence was read. He accepted his fate with the same detached calm he had shown since the day of his arrest. It was as though he believed prison was simply another chapter in his strange, twisted story. The sentence meant that List would never see freedom again. He would live out the rest of his days behind bars, stripped of the comfortable double life he had once built. For many, that was justice enough, though some wished he had shown more remorse. His calmness in court infuriated the families, who wanted to see some crack in his cold facade. But List never wavered. He never truly apologized in a way that showed regret. His sentence ensured that he would die in prison, remembered only as a murderer, not the man he once pretended to be. The end of John List. John List spent nearly 2 decades in prison before his life came to an end. On March 21, 2008, he died at the age of 82 from pneumonia. In his final years, he remained quiet and reclusive, never seeking forgiveness from the public. Even in prison, he continued to attend religious services, clinging to the faith that he once twisted to justify murder. Some reports say he never fully admitted the horror of what he did. Others believe he went to his grave convinced he was right. His death closed the final chapter of a story that haunted America for decades. But for many, his death brought little comfort. The families of his victims were left with wounds that time could never fully heal. The horror of what he did to his wife, his mother, and his children remained carved into history. His name became synonymous with cold-blooded family murder, a grim reminder of how evil can hide behind the mask of normalcy. In the end, John List was not remembered as the quiet accountant or churchgoer he tried to be. He was remembered as the man who annihilated his entire family. His legacy is one of darkness, tragedy, and chilling evil.